Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh, and we have a very interesting one for you today because we're going to be doing something a little bit rare. We're going to take you on a bit of a field trip. We're going to cross the pond to Great Britain, the UK. They just had local elections there, and I've been kind of, as a side obsession, kind of like following the UK political scene since really the pandemic started, and I've come to know a little bit about the recent events, so I'll try and catch you up to speed to give you the context of this election. There's some very fascinating political figures, and it shows you the kind of dynamics of left-wing politics, how it plays out in other countries, and kind of illustrating maybe a clearer path to victory here. Also, the characters are I would argue pretty entertaining, pretty stupid, and pretty awful. They draw out the emotions in you in many different ways. So we're going to give you updates on the latest election night results. But first, pretty much going to tell you the moments leading up to this point. Really, it all starts with the 2016 Brexit referendum. That's really where you can get a sense of the political landscape today. So pretty much what happened there, as I'm sure you may know, Leave won 52 to 48. And it was a pretty significant thing because it was as a rarity, as I'm sure you can imagine. Just think about it's kind of this, just as crazy in the UK. You have an issue that draws support from both Republicans and Democrats. Some Republicans supported one thing, some Republicans supported the other thing. Pretty much really divided the party. That was the same thing with the Conservatives. David Cameron, the Prime Minister at the time, was pretty much the leader on the Conservative side, obviously being the Prime Minister of the Remain campaign. He was a big Remainer. So are a lot of these kind of, shall we say, establishment conservatives, traditional, austerity-minded conservatives that really had the run of the roost through the kind of real austere, incredibly austere response to the 2010 financial crisis. They were punished for that, especially by a lot of their coalition partner, the Liberal Democrats, was punished for that. But that's a whole other thing. I'm trying to avoid getting off on sub-tangents today because, I could really do that sometimes when I'm explaining things. But pretty much what happened is the Conservatives really had their party divided between the kind of upper, kind of like wealthier, kind of more upscale, more cosmopolitan, more establishment conservative members, Tories, supporting people like David Cameron, Theresa May, Anna Soubry was one I remember, a name of a person. I'm not even sure she's in politics anymore. They were kind of the big figureheads in Remain for the Conservatives. And also on the other side for Remain, you had a huge these kind of, again, cosmopolitan, city-dwelling, kind of upper middle class to richer liberals. The kind of typical people you just, I would argue there's major differences between the two, obviously, but I would argue they're kind of the political equivalent to, the MSNBC, Elizabeth Warren, Hillary Clinton supporting Democrats of America. They were the Remain on the left, but then on the right, you had on the Remain on the right, you had people like Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage. Boris Johnson, by the way, in case you didn't know, is the current Prime Minister. He ended up, so you can see where that happened for him. He, by embracing Brexit in kind of a last-minute move, because he knows where the wind's blowing on this, he was able to really secure a lot of political capital, and he surrounded himself with a group of very smart campaigners who understood the real switch away from establishment politics that happened in the North. So geographically, pretty much it goes like this. The South is a little wealthier. Midlands were kind of suburban. A lot more cities in the South. Kind of more. There's definitely some poorer areas in the South, but I would argue the South. British politics observers could dispute this. I would argue the South is probably more equivalent to the coast of England. The Midlands more equivalent to the upper middle class kind of heartlands of the country, the wealthy towns in the Midwest, wealthy areas of the Midwest, which there are plenty. The people lump in kind of the upper middle class conservatives in the Midlands, of England. But then as you go further north, you get pretty much the equivalent of the Rust Belt, like Wisconsin, Michigan, all that stuff. Labor has dominated forever, ever. And all those areas, huge amounts of labor seats voted. By the way, both political parties officially supported remaining in the EU, because Jeremy Corbyn, again, on paper, supported staying in the EU, but he was much more half-hearted about it, to the incredible anger of a lot of people, because he kind of had much more of, I would argue, a connection with those people, and knew that really understood some of the problems the EU had in the first place. Again, that's a whole other debate, but that is the major divide that played into the elections following. There was an election in 2017. Theresa May called it to, she ended up becoming the prime minister. She was not a very reluctant Brexit person, but she won the leadership election, and she won on the promise that she would just do Brexit to the best of her ability, because Brexit, folks, means Brexit. And she was an awful politician. She was pretty widely panned for her just not trying to go between everyone, compromise with everybody, end up winning with nobody. She wasn't very, again, charismatic. She didn't present a very good vision, and she was really having a lot of trouble with the Brexit negotiations because of the fact that, of course, there's a lot of hard Brexiteers, and there's a lot of people who were on Remain and just didn't want the Brexit thing to happen at all, or wanted kind of a very soft Brexit that didn't go the full way in separating the UK from the EU. So that was a major divide, and really presented, if you remember, these like massive parliamentary losses again and again for Theresa May. Those happened after the 2017 election, I believe. But she really couldn't get a position of power to negotiate the EU's exit, the UK's exit from the EU, with the EU down in Brussels. So what she did is she called a 2017 snap election on the leader of the Labour Party at the time, Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn was a socialist leader, kind of one in a way that no one really expected. Definitely the most left-wing leader Labour has, probably had in many, many years. People who know the kind of deep history of Labour better than me would be better to tell you who the last left Labour leader was. But another thing that kind of happened was from there, he was hated by the media, relentlessly attacked, and also by the Parliamentary Labour Party. People didn't want to see him elected prime minister. They certainly didn't want to see him become the leader, represent their party, and possibly in their minds lose them their seat, because socialism just could not work under any circumstances. Very similar to the Bernie Sanders dynamic. But the thing is, Bernie Sanders, when he's a presidential nominee, there's a lot less incentive to go after him. But when he's an MP leading the Parliamentary Labour Party, and there's a bunch of MPs all around him, Parliamentary Labour Party, just the group of Labour MPs in Parliament, they were out to get him from day one. There were public denunciations, everyone in the press talking badly about him from the jump. The press was lapping it all up. And then in 2016, there was a leadership challenge. People voted no confidence. Everyone was calling on him to resign. He ended up winning the leadership election. This is again among the Labour membership, which is pretty much the membership in the UK parties is a little bit different. You actually go pay monthly dues, go to meetings in your local council area, and talk. It's a very active role. So you pay monthly dues to the Labour Party. That's how they get their funds. Their membership exploded under Corbyn, and those are the people who vote in the leadership election. And they voted for Corbyn even bigger in 2016 than they did in 2015. So the membership he was very popular with, he was kind of not on very good footing with the rest of the public, in large part due to kind of disciplined campaigning. He was a backbencher politician. He didn't have the most succinct professional operation, and that was definitely something that stayed with him through his entire time in leadership. He went through to the 2017 election. He caught momentum, especially off the back of a very bold, but also kind of for the right moment manifesto that really was more than a lot of people in the Labour Party wanted, accepting of the Brexit result. A lot of people were pushing for second referendum, people's vote campaign, which really developed in the wake of the 2017 election, probably as a project to undermine the Corbyn leadership. and it was very successful in that. But what happened there is there was a massive improvement for for Jeremy Corbyn. They increased their percentage of the vote. They did better. They improved one election off the other, 2015 to 17, more than pretty much any any Labour candidate or any Labour performance has done since 1945. They were in a very strong position, and they did that by making big gains in the Northeast and also being very strong in London. So those are kind of the two cultural centers and big power bases of Labour. Traditionally, Labour in the heartlands, kind of big working class towns, all throughout the Northeast, these kind of industrial towns that have been kind of ripped out, a lot of kind of infrastructure. Again, that's all happened under Labour watch, and that really pays a big price, or did pay a big price for them in the most recent election we just had. And that was the kind of gap or the plug that had been kind of the leak that had been forming, and Jeremy Corbyn put masking tape over it for the 2017 election with this, I would argue, in large part due to this bold, pro-working class manifesto. Was a big part of it, especially a big part of doing so well, probably more in London, but a huge part of it was respecting the vote to leave the EU in these northern counties, northern constituencies, that made him come within relatively close of overtaking the Conservatives on 2017. So then 2019, he was forced to do a not really forced, but he kind of faced a lot of pressure and ended up agreeing to do, and some people argue he was, a lot of these people hate him, argue that he was against this policy of adding a people's vote to the platform, the manifesto, in 2019. And that was one of the bigger things that led to his demise, because he was walloped in 2019. A lot of people turned against him for, this whole crisis with anti-Semitism. That's a whole another story there. Labour kind of going back and forth and being like a snake biting its tail, and then just always trying to catch after it. It would not go away. The media would keep pressing them on it, and kind of moving the goalposts in very, I would argue, deceitful ways. That hurt them, and also the fact that they were now pushing for a second referendum, blatantly in the manifesto, after doing so well in 2017 without it, which was not the best political move. After a large push of people, same people who are, by the way, currently in the Labour Party today. Keir Starmer went on TV that he's the current leader, who was elected in the wake of Corbyn's loss in 2019. He pretty much had to stand down immediately as leader, get a new leader in there. That was Keir Starmer. And Keir Starmer was one of the people who pushed for Corbyn to adopt that point in the first place, which is, shall we say, interesting. So then we have in 2020, just before the pandemic, Starmer gets elected. He pretty much runs on a platform to unite the Labour Party. He wants to kind of continue Corbyn's policies domestically, which are pretty popular with the members, and gaining popular with the public with kind of a more polished, straightforward, disciplined campaign image. A little bit of more respectability on foreign policy, not, as radical, Palestinians deserve equal rights. No, we're friends of Israel here in the Labour Party. No. But that was quickly abandoned when he sacked, as they say, Rebecca Long-Bailey, who ran as the kind of Corbyn continuity candidate in leadership elections alongside Keir Starmer. She was put in this shadow cabinet as education secretary. It's kind of like a gesture of goodwill. That was for about 2-3 months before she was sacked for posting an article that had one quote in it of an interview with a famous actress. She didn't even say it. That was deemed anti-Semitic. And it was about police being traded in Israel and all that stuff. And then the EHRC report comes out. Corbyn, is suspended, expelled from the party, whip removed. Anyone else in the Labour Party, which pretty much means pretty much he was kicked out. Wasn't kicked out of the Labour Party because they have the executive board that runs through the thing, and actually Keir Starmer can't kick him out of the Labour Party independently. There's a separate Labour board that does that, but he can stop him from voting as a Labour MP in Parliament. So he's now an independent MP. He's not even he can't even, like, the Labour red isn't next to this man's name after being a Labour member since, like, the 1980s. It has been a real tough run for him and the left as of late. They've been marginalized by pretty much every possible turn by the Starmer agenda, and all pretty much while offering very little and just horrendous opposition to the Conservatives, going out of their way to say literally things like, like there was this guy who was shadow minister. So pretty much what that means, he's like in Starmer's top team of MPs, like his closest, if his would-be cabinet members, if he were prime minister, said that, the thing about, I'm just going to play the clip.
You say he's earned you the right to be heard.
Again, this is in the context of the reacting to the elections, by the way, which Labour did not do well in 2021 that were just yesterday.
Not liked what they've heard from the Labour Party. They appear to, and you've virtually conceded, that they have voted for the Conservatives here. So something wrong with Labour's, either the message or the messenger.
But from a Hartlepool perspective, the Tory offer was compelling. Listen, look at the red wall seats surrounding you. Look at the investment in the Towns Fund, the Restoring Your Railways Fund, the free ports, and look what Tory MPs do when you elect them and the Tories funnel money towards them. And it's almost like a no-risk option. Listen, this by-election was never about changing the government. It was never about changing the Prime Minister. But it was a chance for people in Hartlepool to realise investment that for 11 years under the Tories, they have been denied, and it's clear that they've taken that choice.
So he's making kind of a point there that's a little bit about how your Conservatives are being corrupt. They're spending money in only conservative areas. The Conservative government is sending money to only conservative areres. They've recently had a Conservative mayor elected in that area. So, but the point is, what he's saying is this is what Starmer has been saying all over. And again, it's it's really hard because, guys, the Conservatives are just so good at politics and we're so bad. They just say these things they're promising them stuff. We can't do it, guys. Starmer literally being and his outriders on TV are literally saying, "Oh, the vaccine rollout, it was too good." The Conservative government, they've had such a good pandemic. Well, no, they have one of the highest death tolls in Europe right now. And who's supposed to oppose them during the pandemic in the Parliament? Effectively, it was you. That is who it was. And you just are not, you're skipping over that very key logical fact that, people, I think, objective observer looking for the situation will be able to, what in the world is going on? It's very, very clear to see that it's kind of a dishonest framing. But, yeah, so the 2019 elections, they take place, and Starmer gets elected, weak opposition. He starts off with kind of a honeymoon period in the polls, but all throughout the summer and into the fall and through the winter, they go down as he suspends Corbyn. He loses support with Labour voters. A lot of enthusiasm. They were willing to give him a chance for a certain time, but he just was such a wet wipe. As I'm sure we'll play a clip of his voice sooner rather than later. We will, and you'll hear what he sounds like. It is not good. It's just he sounds like someone else. His nose being pinched. He's kind of a very stuffy London lawyer, not the person to appeal to these kind of Rust Belt areas up in the north and of England, the place where there was a major by-election that was supposed to be a test of Keir Starmer's big strategy, which he was elected, was win back the red wall, which similar to the blue wall in America. It's these kind of red seats that Hillary Clinton thought, or Keir Starmer thought, were going to go safely for him. Jeremy Corbyn thought that as well. But the Brexit stance was really something that accelerated the decay and made it worse that did not exist in the United States. So, yeah, and it's a whole other thing we get into for a lot of reasons. But there's something that we have to do, and that's explain to you this by-election here. Labour is mired in another weekend of election misery after the Tories demolished a red wall brick to claim a stunning victory in the Hartlepool by-election. So pretty much what that is, the Hartlepool by-election scenario here, it's one of these northern towns on the seat, been Labour since its creation, like 50-odd years ago. They had a MP that had to resign, Labour did, for sexual harassment. They had a new election where Keir Starmer parachuted in to this 70% pro-Brexit seat, an anti-Brexiter, of course, who was a doctor during the pandemic. They thought that would work for him. And they thought it would be a safe seat. And literally at the beginning of the election, he was picked by Starmer's chief of staff personally. They thought it would be a safe seat, and they would be able to have a good ally from the north to help them in their campaigns, most likely against the left wing of the Labour Party. But that is not what happened, because this seat, to give you the recent history, it was 52% of the vote for Labour in 2017 when they really surged in the north and in London. But it did go down, obviously, massively in 2019 with that rough loss. They got roughly 37%, I think 37% of the vote in 2019. That was also kind of split with the Conservatives and the Brexit Party, which is kind of a third party to the right of the Conservatives, of hard Brexiteers that were just too annoying for the Conservative Party, I guess. So they weren't running in this election. And what happened was the candidate, the Labour candidate, Paul Williams, lost by 51.9% of the vote to Jill Mortimer, up 23% from the last time there was an election. And the Labour, they lost 9% of their vote share, which really kind of destroys the argument that a lot of people had that, oh, it's just the Brexit Party saving Corbyn in the last time. Well, they still went back. People who voted for them in that time already, like, even with the Brexit Party existing, didn't vote for them again. So they went down even further. And there are people who, again, this is what the right of the party is now saying as an excuse for this really disastrous loss, giving up a super strong, supposedly, Labour seat that had been trending down since about 2001. It went up in 2017 and then again down in 2019 to finally lose in 2021. Like the big thing in the end for the like literally Tony Blair's former advisor, huge anti-Corbyn guy, and also coincidentally huge pro-Remain guy, anti-Brexiteer, who kind of was one of the key architects in pushing the policy on Labour in 2019, says on the radio today that, oh yeah, it was two C's, COVID and Corbyn, as if to say, people who, when Corbyn was leader, said, I'm going to vote for the Labour candidate, because I like him, and now, in 2021, Corbyn is not the leader. They're saying, yeah, I'm not going to vote for Corbyn actually this time because I'm too mad at the Labour Party for Corbyn. That is the idea that people in the center of the Labour Party are pushing at the moment. It is really quite insane. So that was one of the big blows, the big results that was the headliner that was declared last night. Conservative Jill Mortimer losing to Paul Williams. So the doctor, Jill Mortimer, by the way, not even from the area, which is a big blow when you do these like local constituency elections. Also up for elections was the kind of English council seats, were pretty much the town council for the area. They are elected for kind of smaller wards, and Keir Starmer's party suffered a huge amount of losses in them as voters shrugged off these kind of allegations against Tory corruption, which is it's very similar to dynamic in America. Like, people don't care that much about corruption, like corrupt politicians, and kind of Starmer has based a lot of his campaign as of late to calling him out for them, and obviously the most ineffective way possible, saying that he had like poor taste in cabins, or not cabin, like, or furniture for the house, not cabins. I was thinking maybe cabinets, I don't know, but it was poor furniture in the house. So like it's just I can't even find the word to explain it. It's such a stupid scandal. It's like Boris Johnson like paid too much to refurbish the apartment next to Downing Street, and it was related to a conservative like donor. So there's some sort of political implications there. But his girlfriend was like, Theresa May left the place looking like a John Lewis nightmare, which is apparently a very popular clothing or furniture store in the UK. And Starmer went to John Lewis to like look out curtains and was like, oh, these are quite all right to me. I'm relatable. And people didn't quite buy that, as it turned out, in the north of England. So in the Tees Valley mayoral contest, which is pretty much a bigger like chunk of towns in and around Hartlepool. Hartlepool is one of them in this Tees Valley region. The Conservative incumbent, who just squeaked by, flipped the seat for the Conservatives in the last local election, ended up beating his Labour rival by the score of 73 to 27%. So absolutely destroyed him. And that was because he was like doing things that actually helped the community, like bold economic policies that helped rebuild the community, like bringing the local airport into public ownership. It's just something Corbyn would have done. The West Midlands mayoral result is going to be due out on Saturday. It could pile on the agony for Labour as Tory strategists are confident for victory of reigning mayor Andy Street. Sadiq Khan's in London. But that's even crazier. People are not sure. They're saying it's too early to say if he's going to win yet, as the votes are still being counted. It's 39 to 37 the last time they updated the results there. Sadiq Khan is leading over a guy named Sean Bailey, who is like saying racist and sexist things left and right, has a ton of baggage, ran an absolutely awful campaign, and Sadiq Khan is struggling to win. People are like, he may not even need a second round of counting. He may just win outright at 50%. But no, he's down on 39. 37% of the vote has already come in for Sean Bailey, the Conservative candidate, who no one thought was going to come close. But, you know, it is earlier in the election, and the Conservative areas are going to count first. So that is something that we got to kind of come back to. A fresh ballot box meltdown across England saw electors switch to the Conservatives following 11 years of Tory rule from Westminster, prompting another round of Labour soul-searching and tough questions for Starmer's 13th month premiership. But the results are not all rosy for the Tories, where their vote share in Scotland was actually down in the early counting, so it's kind of to be determined. The big story there in Scotland is obviously with the independence referendum. They're trying to ask for another one. Doesn't look like it at this time, but the First Minister there, Nicola Sturgeon of the Scottish National Party, they are the people pushing for the second referendum on Scottish independence. They're, along with the Greens, are going to form most likely a majority government, but they can't get a majority on their own. That kind of limits the case for them to take to Westminster and push for an outright referendum, a second chance, because they got to go to Westminster, go to Boris Johnson legally, and Boris Johnson probably wouldn't have approved it. He would have hemmed it on for a long time had she won, but now that she's not even going to win a full majority, it's going to be a little bit tougher still. So results were also mixed for Labour, who are actually faring better over in Wales, where they have a leader who's pretty much been in power for 20 years, ever since they made the Welsh Parliament in 1999. This was the Scotland guy. Mark Drakeford. He's the current First Minister of Wales. He's doing well, kind of running separately from the UK Labour campaign. And they are doing pretty well with the Welsh Parliament, and look like they will possibly even win a majority, but that's early to tell yet. Labour held key Tory target seat Wrexham with a slightly increased vote share, while the party raised its vote share in Gower by 7% to the Tories 1%. So those are all just random places in Wales. With 47 to 60 Welsh Parliament seats declared, Labour is edging towards a majority in a major boost for the Labour Party. Wales, Labour people just may want to move to Wales at this point and give up. Results, continue to pour in until Sunday, including for the Welsh and Scottish Parliaments, which are only starting to count this morning. All right, so this 143 English councils, more than 5,000 seats are up for grabs on 21 county, 28 unitarians, a bunch of stuff. Labour lost a whopping 10 seats in traditional Bellwether, Nuneaton, and Bedworth. The Tories snatched Harlow in Essex from Labour after 7 seats change, and took Northumberland from no overall control. So pretty much they're making gains everywhere. They're making gains to the east, the west, the south. Not even in London are they strong right now. That was really kind of a massive, massive surprise for them. Let's get some check in on what Keir Starmer had to say, sounding stuffy as all hell in a big room full of parliamentary books.
I'm disappointed in the results, and I take full responsibility for the results, and I will take full responsibility for fixing things. We have changed as a party, but we haven't set out a strong enough case to the country. Very often we've been talking to ourselves instead of to the country, and we've lost the trust of working people, particularly in places like Hartlepool. I intend to do whatever is necessary to fix that.
And when they asked him how, he was like, well, we're going to face the country. And just refused to, literally said, I'm not going to lay out any policy agenda in this interview. Like, you haven't laid one out in the first 13 months. So, I mean, now may be a good time to start if you want to get a chance in the next election, which right now is 2024. So, but even still, they're a long ways off. People are saying, like, they're going to lose maybe 40 seats based on this performance. So that is not good. And they're already incredibly off. They have an 80-seat majority right now, the Conservatives do. So they're in no position to lose drastically again. Yes, the Conservatives, again, they won the Hartlepool by-election with a majority of 6,940 votes, more than anyone expected. And a swing from Labour of 16%. Tories won councils in Northumberland, Harlow, Redditch, Dudley, and Nuneaton Bedworth, but they lost control in Cambridgeshire, one of the kind of few good results. It didn't even go to Labour. Labour wins the mayoral contest in Doncaster, which is safe, and Liverpool, which is incredibly safe, and Conservative, that we talked about that, he increases his majority, Ben Houchin, in Tees Valley. The SNP is likely to form a next Scottish government, but it's unclear if they can secure 65 seats needed for an outright majority in the Parliament. With 48 of 129 seats declared, the SNP of 39 MSPs, the Lib Dems 4, the Conservatives 3, and Labour has 2. With 48 out of 60 seats declared, Labour's on 28 in the Welsh Parliament. The Conservatives on 12, and Plaid Cymru, that's how you say it, Plaid Cymru on 8. So that's the Welsh National Party. So what happens from here? Well, the thing is, there is an election and a seat coming up very similar to Hartlepool, because the MP there has stepped down in a region called West Yorkshire, and she is going to be a mayor there pretty soon. So she is going to leave a vacant seat in a pretty interesting Labour area that should go Labour, but it's going to be interesting. It's a very similar area, and if he loses that election, Starmer does, with just rudderless policy. And again, this is the tweet that I personally highlighted today. It was from a BBC reporter. Adam Bienkov, he tweeted this out. He was saying that, and this was a quote, again, from Starmer, in that same interview that we played to you before. Keir Starmer asked for concrete policy changes Labour will now make in response to these election results, tells the BBC that he will, quote, change the thing that need changing, and that change is the thing that I will bring about. So, literally, that's not a joke. Sorry, this is the Business Insider guy. I want to read that again. This is Adam Bianco, Business Insider. Keir Starmer asked for concrete policy changes that Labour will now make in response to these election results, tells the BBC that, quote, he will change the things that need changing, and that is the change that I will bring about. So, thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, wise sir. Like, this is like the Onion video that's like, there was a fire in the Bronx. The house was on fire because it burned down because it was on fire in the Bronx. Just absolutely nothing. Like, blech. It has been a pretty rough night for them over on the center of Labour. Corbyn, though, I have to say, really was quite impressive, although his former deputy leader, John McDonnell, kind of failed to jump on the jump on the ball, Corbyn gave an interview to Channel 4 where he was pretty strong in his repudiation of Starmer's campaign in a way that could be respected because, of course, he's kind of outside the Labour Party and doesn't really have. He's not going to be he's not going to be really in the running for anything in the future. So pretty strong words. And interesting how he deals with just compare that kind of talk that we just heard from Keir Starmer. And the questions that he was asked, by the way, were just really simple. It's like, what is your vision? What policy changes will you bring? But this is the stuff that Corbyn's getting over on Channel 4. Take a look at this.
What's in 18 and 19 manifestos which proved themselves to be very popular. We were condemned for the amount of money we wanted to spend on investment, all of which has now happened because of the COVID crisis. I would have concentrated on the levels of inequality and injustice in our society. I wouldn't have given the Tories any space or any support for their shambolic and incompetent handling of so much to do with COVID, and offer people a vision of social justice, offer people a vision of safe, secure, permanent jobs, not the sort of fly-by-night insecure economy, which is the main message that Boris Johnson's Tories are offering. We could give out
But people here have voted Conservative.
That would be different.
They voted for Boris Johnson. Isn't it possible they like what they're getting, and they're not interested in a left-wing Labour prospectus?
A lot of people didn't vote as well, actually. I think we have to make, as a Labour Party, a very clear pitch on what social justice would look like, what real opportunity would look like, because people have had far too long of this kind of economic strategy, which leaves so many people poor, and indeed, since the COVID crisis begun, the levels of inequality in Britain have got worse. The millionaires that have come as a result of government spending on COVID, all of these things need to be challenged. You don't succeed in challenging the government if you spend your time agreeing with what their strategy is. I don't agree with their strategy. Right. I don't support their strategy. What I want to see is a different world.
But the other side of the Labour Party think that you are the problem, that this loss was your legacy, that you'd done so much damage up here and moved Labour so far away from aspiration and what people wanted in places like Hartlepool, that it's really you that's the problem, and that the longer you keep talking about that kind of vision, the more Keir Starmer needs to take you on and drum you out.
During my time as leader of the party, we trebled our membership to 600,000. We developed a democratic form of policy making. We didn't impose things on people. We developed that democracy within the party. And whilst we didn't obviously win in 2019, I know that better than anybody else, the vote we got, the national popular vote we got, was the highest of any election since 2001, excepting the very big vote we got in 2017. So to say our policies were unpopular is simply not true. And I think the party has to recognise what its roots are, what its principles are, and meet people's needs. Insecure housing, insecure work, insecure jobs, insufficiency of benefit, terrible mental health stress and poverty as a result of the COVID pandemic. These are the issues that Labour should be speaking up for. Many people on the doorsteps, and I found the same yesterday in my own constituency, where, by the way, we had some very, very good results in local elections. I found that people simply wanted to know what the Labour Party now stands for.
There you have it there. Corbyn over on Channel 4 making some pretty solid points. A very interesting situation. We're going to continue to follow it, and that'll be all for us today. It's Newsflash.